Great. So thank you very much for participating in this important webinar. Very happy to see the people here. And I know it's, everyone's working on their jobs. And so, but this is a very important topic for us. So I want to provide some contextual information for those maybe not familiar with SDG7 or with evaluation. And there are a number of goals here. That hold on one sec. There are 17 goals, and you can see they cover a wide variety of topics dealing with poverty, hunger, health, education, etc. We're focusing on number 7 and to a limited extent number 13. 7 deals with affordable and clean energy, 13 with climate action. And they're based on 5 universal principles and people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. And they help define a path to end poverty, ensure prosperity, and protect the planet and its inhabitants. As I mentioned, there's 17 SDGs. In each of the SDGs are targets and then indicators. SDG 7 is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, modern energy for all. And for me and for the work at Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific, energy efficiency is a big component of what we're focused on, and it's definitely a key constituent of SDG 7. Climate action, SDG 13, of course, reducing greenhouse gas emissions is just as relevant, and we try to tie 7 and 13 together. The importance, of SDG evaluations. It's a major international development commitment, and we're going to see this for at least the next 15 years, if not more. And so it's essential to know if it works and the money is well spent. Each evaluation process is what we call country-driven and participatory. So the countries own the SDGs, their goals and targets, and the national governments are the key agencies responsible for implementing the evaluations. The program is huge and complex with multiple actors, objectives, and programs at all levels. And for some people, they don't believe it's possible to evaluate the SDGs for these very reasons. And we're not just monitoring, we really want people to evaluate what is going on, what works, what doesn't, how things can be improved. Most agencies also focus on a particular sector. So if you work in the health industry, you're going to focus on health. If you work on equity, you're focusing on equity. If you're focusing on climate change, etc. The key is how do you bring all these different sectors together? And it's very difficult to evaluate that intersectorality. Therefore, we need different kinds of organizations to work together on an integrated evaluation. So most agencies focus on results-based approaches with little attention to sustainability. It's difficult, several topics are very difficult to evaluate: vulnerability, exclusion, gender analysis, but people are making progress in doing that as well. Oh, can't hardly. So the SDG focuses the work on broad questions about the effectiveness of development aid, what works and for whom, where, why, and how. And as I mentioned, brings together many different kinds of organizations and talents, gives voice to vulnerable groups and grassroots organizations, and it does provide a unique access to these worldwide platforms. Usually when we do evaluations, we have a smaller audience. Now we have a much bigger audience, and we can disseminate the results. So we can now ask new and broader long-term questions. We can introduce a range of evaluations of complexity. We can identify who's being left out and looking at intersectoral linkages. And then we think about silos. And I've written about how we need to break down silos because we have these different groups. And how do you connect the different silos, the health with equity, for example, climate change, and so on? And how do we integrate and align and provide some coherence across these different sectors? And then, of course, we want to connect what's happening locally with what's happening globally and vice versa. A few comments about Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific, who's hosting this seminar, this webinar. It's a nonprofit that was established in 2018. And our mission, and I'm on the steering committee, is to take a leadership role in expanding the practice of and capacity for what we call objective evaluation in the energy efficiency and renewable energy program policy arena. We have workshops, conferences, webinars. We have our own website, and you can, some of you may have participated in some of these activities. And the key, what we're trying to do is have self-sustaining evaluation communities. We have a steering committee and advisory committee, and I encourage you all to go to the website here to learn more about EEAP. We have, this is the first of two and possibly more coming on the evaluation of SDG7. Michael and Naveen will be talking today. We have Sahini and Diane in a couple weeks, and I hope you can attend that as well. And there is, as Nazir mentioned, we have a webinar feedback form we'd like to hear from you. So I think I'm going to stop sharing. Michael, you can, how can I get this? There, that should do it. You can start sharing yours. And while you do that, I am going to see if it's possible. Oh, did I stop sharing? Let's see. Yeah, good. Bear with me 1 second. I'm gonna close my file here. So Michael is the section chief of the Energy Division in the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, UNESCAP. Since commencing his role in 2018, Michael's worked on regional cooperation for sustainable energy and energy connectivity across ESCAP's 53 member countries, spearheading the division's intergovernmental technical assistance and knowledge building efforts. Prior to this, he was the acting director of UNESCAP's sub-regional office for South and Southwest Asia, overseeing 10 countries in that region. And I think, and his experience over the last 20 years covers the private sector, government, and international organizations with a focus on sustainable development, energy, technology, and climate change. So with that, Michael, you can take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Ed. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at this seminar series. A lot of things that Ed said in his introduction resonated quite strongly with me, what he said about the SDGs. And so hopefully through this presentation, I can shed some light on this topic. I can't pretend to have all the answers, but I think that's part of the purpose of getting us together so that we can share our ideas and experience on this complex topic. So I'm going to talk about this process we have gone through about the SDG7 national roadmaps that we've been undertaking since 2018, and starting with a bit of background. It's actually an initiative of ESCAP member states through a ministerial declaration in 2018, where they requested ESCAP to develop national roadmaps, which really look at the progress of SDG7 in different countries and come up with ways of closing those gaps through a series of analyses and recommendations. And of course, when we think about SDG7 and the energy transition, you may well know the different targets that underpin SDG7. Of course, we have access to electricity, access to clean cooking fuel, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. And I would suggest that those elements don't sit alone in silos. They're actually quite interconnected. So what we do in one area, if we're having great success in one of those targets, it can actually also push ahead other targets. And a simple example might be let's say in a particular country, we have great success in energy efficiency, so then energy consumption comes right down. Well, then automatically our renewable energy percentage comes up, because if we're using less energy overall, the same amount of renewable energy will actually give a bigger percentage. Another example might be when we use renewable energy, it's actually much more efficient than burning coal or gas. So that gives a boost to energy efficiency. Similarly, when we're looking at clean cooking in remote parts of the Asia Pacific region, we can actually use renewable energy for that purpose through electric cooking. We can use solar PV for access to electricity, which again enhances renewable energy. So all of these are interconnected. And of course, when we look at energy, the role it plays in each economy, energy is the biggest driver of greenhouse gas emissions, as we know. So obviously, the nationally determined contribution, the emissions reduction target under the Paris Agreement, that needs to be an all-encompassing target. In a sense, it's a boundary condition that this analysis has to fulfill. Yes, we need to achieve SDG7, but also we need to hit these emission reduction targets under the Paris Agreement. So that's really kind of what I was talking about in the previous slide. When we look at a particular country and we're thinking about how can we come up with recommendations to close the gaps in SDG7, what do we need to look at? Because nothing stays the same. It's a jigsaw of moving pieces. We have sustained economic growth. We have demographic changes. We need to look, of course, at the available energy resources. And as we're doing this analysis, we also need to look at energy security. How do we ensure that there's energy security in terms of affordability, availability, non-interruptibility of energy supplies, and what is the least cost pathway to achieve all of these targets? So it is rather complex. So over the years, we've progressed very steadily with working with countries, starting small and scaling up. We've also expanded the work to the subnational level, for example, provinces and cities. We've done that in countries like Thailand and Philippines, where we've gone to the subnational and city level. And so right now, the count is about 16 countries that we're either working with or have completed SDG7 roadmaps, and about 9 provinces or cities, and a few more in the pipeline. And these are just some pictures of the completed reports. Of course, if you Google SGAP, SDG7 roadmaps, you can find all of these. And if you're interested in a particular country, you can have a look at it and see about the recommendations. But let's look at some of the common findings, because of course we go to these 16 countries, they're all very different. Some are small island states in the Pacific, some are landlocked countries in Central Asia. Very different circumstances in terms of what energy is used for, where the energy is coming from, what is the level of development, what are the technologies available. But there are some commonalities. And one of them is about access to clean cooking fuel. And so most of the analyses that we've done point to the need to do more on clean cooking, because this is one of the SDG targets that's lagging. So right now we're about 74% access to clean cooking in Asia Pacific, with 6 years to go. So this target is one that's very challenging. Some of the countries that we worked in point to space heating, and we didn't think about this too much when we started. We think about electricity, clean cooking, but in colder parts of the region, space heating in rural areas is a big energy demand source. So that's something that needs to be looked at too. Generally speaking, the power sector is coming to focus because it's a very big part of the overall energy system, a very big source of emissions. So decarbonizing the power sector with renewable technologies is also a common recommendation. EVs, obviously they're a solution that bring together energy efficiency plus renewable energy. So most of the roadmaps, or almost all of them, have accelerated an uptake of EVs and accelerated uptake, particularly looking at things like public transport. And lastly, MEPS, sorry for the acronym, mandatory minimum energy performance standards for appliances. So this is kind of a very easy and cost-effective thing. As a government policy, you implement a minimum performance standards for things like air conditioners, fridges, etc., and that automatically lifts energy efficiency quite rapidly. So that just gives you a sense of some of the common findings that we will see. How do these roadmaps make an impact in terms of national policy? Well, we have two examples, I guess, of Fiji and Tonga, where the SDG7 roadmap has really underpinned some of these goals and targets in the like medium and near-term energy planning. So we're very happy that that has assisted these countries in this manner. One aspect of the project that we do is training. And again, when we say next step, this is actually the analytical framework that underpins the development of roadmaps. So we have this next step methodology, and we also have a website for next step. What we want to do is to hand over to policymakers the ability to do future scenario analysis, future optimization. And so to that end, we do training. So we've done quite a few training courses as shown there, and we've got a few more planned for 2024. So just to give examples of follow-up, so once we've completed the roadmap, of course, what we would like to do is to pick apart those recommendations and figure out how do we support each country to develop or to implement these particular recommendations. A few examples here. In Bhutan, we're doing clean cooking based on electricity, which was one of the recommendations. In Georgia, we've looked at the SME sector. How can policy mechanisms increase the use of renewable energy and better energy efficiency among SMEs? In Lao PDR, we're also going to speak about clean cooking this year. And in Tonga, we supported them to develop a Green Climate Fund proposal on energy efficiency. And of course, in Kiribati this year, we'll be working on minimum energy performance standards. So they're just a couple of examples. We have quite a few more in the pipeline. So I guess when Ed talked about the very interesting point about the SDGs, I mean, he mentioned that SDGs are, holistic, they're multi-sectoral, they're all-encompassing. The 2030 Agenda has 17 SDGs, and they're not standalone SDGs. There's many interlinkages between them. And he pointed out that a lot of what's being done is monitoring rather than evaluation, which is very complex. So just to think about our initiative on SDG7 roadmaps, what are some of the challenges of converting this analysis into action? I think, first of all, we can come up with policy recommendations, and many organizations do that. But to convert that recommendation into a policy action, it can take a long time. There's a lot of processes to go to, while at the same time, the clock is ticking for SDG7. We have 6 years to go. Some of the recommendations that we put up, they do require substantial funding, and that needs external support from the development community. Some of the least developed countries that we work with may not have the in-house capacity to implement these. That itself requires support in terms of capacity development. And then is the question, we produce this SDG7 roadmap, but how do we identify and isolate that impact vis-a-vis other drivers that might be out there? So what is the counterfactual? How do we analyze the situation of what would happen if we never did the roadmap? This is part of the challenge. But I think on the opportunity side, the roadmap represents a bit of a catalyst, or maybe an opportunity to bring together regional and global partners, which can fast track the process. Countries can also develop bankable projects using this analysis, which can attract funding agencies and donors. And also I mentioned capacity development. So human capacity is a huge part of this. The roadmap can point to certain capacity development needs, which can then be packaged up and delivered. So we've been talking about change, the transformation of the global approach to sustainability through the SDGs, and in this case, SDG7, rethinking the whole global and regional energy system towards sustainability. So change is certainly not easy, and some of the issues that we face is about the capacity to identify appropriate policy changes, particularly with the least developed countries and the small island developing states. There is a lot of capacity gaps there. Political motivation, okay, there's always somebody in charge that makes the decisions. What is the degree of political motivation to develop and implement these policy changes? You can have the best analysis in the world that points to the economics and efficiency, but it's often based on some kind of political calculus, and that is something that's hard to shift. Another one is resources availability. there are competing development priorities outside the energy sector, which might sit higher in the priority list above energy. There are a lot of issues that developing countries are struggling with, of which energy and climate is only one. And lastly, monitoring of progress. So it's important to, as you implement policies, to be able to monitor their progress. And in many cases, there's no mechanism to do this. Developing one at the national level could be very expensive. But what about, for example, developing a universal mechanism for countries to monitor SDG7 progress? That's another possibility. So in terms of evaluation, so how do we evaluate at what level and who should do it? Again, I'm coming up probably with more questions than answers, but we need to consider the level of evaluation. Do we evaluate policies at a very macro level? Do we evaluate the programs that sit under them, or even the projects? So you could argue, for example, that the government-instituted policies and programs that support SDG7 are the ones that should be evaluated. It's really important to know what works and what doesn't work, not just to inform the stakeholders in the country, but also to inform other countries in the region. So how can we consider particularly the ancillary benefits? When we talk about energy, energy is cross-cutting. It affects poverty, it affects gender, it affects environment, economy, etc. If we look at the interlinkages between SDG7, there's been, and the rest of the 17 SDGs, there's been analysis that shows that SDG7 is the most interlinked SDG. In other words, it has more connections to the other SDGs than any other one. So therefore, when we do this evaluation, we need to think carefully about the ancillary benefits. An example I give you is COVID-19. When COVID-19 hit Asia Pacific and the world, countries went into economic recovery mode. How can we restart economies after the huge shock? So government needs to invest. One of the best ways that you can do that, in fact, is to invest in energy efficiency and renewables. So why is that? It's in fact because you generate more jobs and more economic activity per dollar of investment than you do with investing in fossil fuels. That's a good example of ancillary benefits, but there are many of them that we need to consider. Another point is the capacities and resources, not just at the national level, but at subnational and local levels. What are their capacity to do evaluations? This is often limited. And then if we bring in external expertise from other countries, do they know the full context? Can they do this evaluation if they're new in the country and don't understand all of the intricacies involved? So following on that, I think boosting capacity for monitoring and evaluation is a key point. And in terms of stakeholders, it's important to be very inclusive, not just to be speaking to government, but the private sector who build all of this energy infrastructure are really important. Civil society, who are looking at many of the non-financial, looking at the social impacts of energy, and of course, academia. It's important to have a multi-sectoral approach. So that's where I will leave my presentation. My sincere thanks to Ed and his colleagues for the invite to speak to you, and very happy to hand the floor back to Ed.
Great, thank you very much. That was excellent. We have, as to remind you, we've saved time at the end of the webinar for questions, but if there's anybody on the call here who has some clarification questions, we can address those now, or I should say Michael will address them now, but so either start talking or not, or raise or chat, whatever. Otherwise, if there aren't, we'll go to the end and then we have some questions we can share. I don't see anybody raising their hand or unmuting. So why don't we have Navin, if you could put on your presentation and I'll introduce you while you do that. Navin Kumarcha has been working in the academic sector as a faculty at the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at the Pultrop campus at Tribhuvan University in Nepal. Currently, he's engaged in research activities related to energy planning, policy, and evaluation. His areas of interest include renewable energy and, more specifically, the sustainability of household biodigesters in developing countries. And he's published papers and journal in the international conference proceedings. And I'll hand it over to you, and you can put up your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Thank you, everyone, and good morning to all of you. Edward already introduced me, so there's no need for further introduction. So let me share my screen first, then I'll explain something. Is it okay? Is it visible?
Yes, looks very good.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So today, actually, basically, I'll be talking about on a specific target of SDG7, because I'm not going to explain too much things about SDG, because all those who are in this forum, they are all aware about what is SDG, and Ad and Michael already explained the status of SDG. So basically, I'll be talking about very specific on SDG target 7.1, especially in Nepal, with reference to LDC, least developed country, because we have our own socio-cultural, barrier. We have our own problem, unique problem, which is different from developing world and developed world. So we have specific challenges, and I'll try to explain which type of challenges we are facing to achieve SDG, specifically SDG 7.1 from policy perspective. As Edward already explained, that I'm not from a policy background, although I'm trying to link my technical things with the policy perspective. So throughout my presentation, basically I'll be presenting in very brief about status of SDG 7 in Nepal, and what are the challenges you are facing to achieve SDG 7. And to achieve SDG 7, specifically to achieve SDG 7.1, government of Nepal, along with their development partner, they are running a program like household biogas plant for and so I'll be talking about potential of this household biogas plant, and which type of barrier the program is facing from policy perspective. And at the end, in very brief, I have summarized the things in the form of SWOT, that means strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat in household biogas plant. So regarding SDG 7, as Nepal is committed to achieve SDG by 2030, because Nepal is a signatory of that SDG, and they are running. They have proposed their different program, policies, everything to fulfill because Nepal is committed to achieve SDG, and they have proposed their own roadmap, policy tool at different tiers of government. But actually, we have 3 tiers of government: one at a top level, that is a federal level; another is at provincial level; and one is at the what you call local level. So we have 3 tiers of government, and all 3 tiers of government have proposed their own program policy to achieve SDG. And nowadays, the government has mainstreamed the SDG planning process through 3 years periodic plan. Actually, in Nepal, normally 3 years periodic plan is proposed by the executive, which is passed by legislative, and that is implemented. This is all about the plan and policy from the top level perspective. And and the main challenge is now, the main issue is the 90% household has access to electricity, but still around 70% of household depend upon solid biomass for cooking fuel. So this is the gap. This is the main gap which I will be talking about. And then around 27% population are using liquefied petroleum gas, which is considered as a clean cooking form of gas. But from academic perspective, I don't want to go in detail, but from academic perspective, if you analyze from life cycle perspective, the situation is a little bit different. But still, it has been categorized under clean cooking category. So you can consider it as from a clean cooking category. And here, just I want to share one small screenshot, which is just published by National Planning Commission, which is the apex planning body of the Nepal. And let's focus on the 7.1.1. It clearly says that proportion of population with access to electricity in 2015 it was 74%. 2019 it was around 80%. Now we have around 85% population has a direct access of electricity. So far so good. And then if you focus here, like here's household using solid fuel as primary source of energy for cooking fuel, it was 75% in 2015. In 2019, it is 65%. And here it is claimed that it's 55%. But if you have a look at this slide, this report has been published by WEX. WEX is also working in the energy sector and it's a government body, and it clearly says that residential sector is the main consumer of energy, that is around 61%. And in next figure you can see around 81%, 82% population is still relying on fuel wood, which is non-cleaner form of cooking fuel. All of us are aware about it. And similarly, around 6% is still rely on animal waste or agriculture residue and LP oil. So my point here is, so that this data, and if you compare this data with that data, you can find there is some sorts of gap or glitch or whatever you want to say, you can say, but there is no uniformity between these two data, although these data are published by government agencies. So in brief, solid biomass remains the predominant cooking fuel in Nepal. Even till now, around 80% of household relying on solid fuel. That is a real challenge. Dependency is more even proportional in rural areas, because in rural areas, socioeconomic status is a little bit, in comparison to urban area, it's a little bit in lower position. And we can assume it's a severe adverse environmental impact due to the heavy consumption of solid biomass. So what are the major challenges? As Michael explained, that SCAPE is also working on assisting the government, especially government from LDC to make their plan, policy, roadmap. But even just when I had gone through the website, I found that they have mentioned the same challenges what I faced during my research. Like achieving universal access to clean cooking fuel and technology by today remains the most specific challenge to Nepal. That's why specifically I'm focusing on 7.1. And second thing, the UN agency, this clearly says that prominent challenge include localization of SDG. That means localization SDG at the grassroots level. That means at the local level, and lack of adequate data, which I just explained a few moments before, that we have a discrepancy in data as well, and coordination and follow up. Therefore, closer cooperation coherence is required. That is the gist from United Nations. They have published on report, and this is a gist of the last report. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to explain you that how policy is affecting the program. Like household biogas digester or biogas plant was has been launched by government along with its developing partner. And I will try to explain how this program is affected from policy at the grassroots level and what we can do to make it more effective from policy perspective. So the government, along with developing partners, they are promoting household biodigester for the last 6 decades. Especially our focus is much more when we started talking about SDG, and its aim to lower the dependency on solid biomass. That is the only aim, because as I explained, that around 80% population is still rely on solid biomass for cooking. So and then biogas, what is biogas? Biogas is a cleaner form of cooking fuel. So household biogas plant is being promoted because it has two objectives. The first objective, to manage domestic waste, which if you don't manage it properly, then it may have a severe impact in terms of greenhouse gases. So this is the first aim. And second objective was to produce biogas. Actually, but let me explain in very brief what is biogas. That biogas is generated after anaerobic digestion of domestic waste. So you can convert domestic waste in terms of biogas, which you can use for cooking purpose. So that is the whole idea behind household biogas plant. And technology, and we have a huge potential of household biogas plant in the country, because the research says that, like, theoretically this much amount, like 3.58 million metric cube per year biogas can be produced from livestock manure only. I'm not talking about all the domestic, from livestock manure only, which is equivalent to 110 million LPG cylinder, and it is more than 4 times the current consumption of LPG cylinder in Nepal, and it is 20 times higher than the current generation. Whatever we are generating, we can increase this by 20 times more if you promote properly, if you operate properly. Of course, we need some policy support, and we have a nationwide dissemination of household biogas plant. Here you can see up to 96, 94, the demand was not too high. But if you see here, like after 2000, or especially after 2008, when we started talking about SDG, the demand was increased, and you can see here. And then here it's interesting point, after 2012 or 13, demand, there's no more demand for household biogas plant at the ground level. So as the figure explains clearly, the demand dropped exponentially, and the demand is decreasing exponentially too, up to 2018, and even in 2023, if you see the annual installation of household biogas plant, it's very low rate. So what is the main reason? So I'll try to explain the main reason from policy perspective. So this is the expectation, and this is the reality. Expectation, as I explained, normally domestic waste, cattle dung and human excreta, it is converted into biogas, which is a clean form of cooking fuel. It is reliable. It is supposed to be reliable, and the state is providing too much subsidy. But still, this program is facing too much challenge. Actually, it was supposed to be like this. We are expecting the biogas in this form, and whatever the residue we get after digestion, that is a nutrient-rich fertilizer, and that is very appropriate to replace synthetic fertilizer at local level. See, it was supposed to be like this, but this is the real scenario. This is not the real scenario of all the household biogas plant, but we normally, what we did, we conducted a field visit of 308 stratified random sampling. Based on that, what we concluded, around 23% household biogas plant are facing the challenge, which I am showing in the second figure. So why this? So I'll try to explore this from policy perspective, and at the end of this presentation, I'll just explain this briefly in the form of SWOT analysis. So this is the policy tools and institutional framework which is governing household biogas plant. Here you can see like periodic plan which I discussed. This is the plan which is normally planned by apex body, that is National Planning Commission. Of course, it coordinates with the all provincial body, local body. And these are some laws, policy tools like Environmental Protection Act, Biomass Energy Strategy, Rural Energy. There are too many policy tools which are governing not only biogas sector, but all forms of renewable energy sector. But I'm talking about biogas sector, so I'll request you to understand, to visualize all these policy tools are supporting biogas here. Here you can see AEPC, it's a government focal agency, Alternate Energy Promotion Center. It's a focal agency, it's a government agency, and it's AEPC responsibility to coordinate, mobilize the resources and implement all this policy. So AEPC is a focal agency. And more specifically about household biogas plant, how it works, I'll just try to explain in very brief. Consumer demands, consumer coordinates with local body, consumer gets some documentation from local body, then they approach to AEPC, which is the focal body, and then AEPC, whether AEPC may accept or may reject their proposal. They actually evaluate their proposal based on their own guideline. They have already set up their guideline. It is clearly mentioned in the renewable energy subsidy policy. It is already mentioned there. Based on that, they select. Once it is selected, then that program is eligible for subsidy as per RE, renewable energy subsidy policy. Then AEPC has already maintained the roster of biogas company, and it is only biogas company, only they can construct on behalf of AEPC or consumer. And the problem, and then once they install it, it is their responsibility to maintain these household biogas plant, visit regularly, frequently. But the flaws here is, in subsidy policy, it is clearly mentioned that they are responsible only for 3 years. That means its warranty period is only 3 years. So within 3 years, if anything happens, they are responsible. Even consumer can complain, approach to AEPC. But after 3 years, what may happen or how the things will go, it is not mentioned clearly in that policy. So these are the policy. I'm not going to discuss about in detail about this policy. I already explained. These all policies are governing renewable energy sector and specifically biogas too. So here I have just included 3-4 points like policy demand from bottom up. I mean the local the end user, that is a SBD user, they are demanding policy, but it's supply from top. That is policy, and this is the gap. And I mean, to conclude this point, I have specifically evaluated RE subsidy policy in brief with reference to our case study, that is household biogas plant. So I have just identified 2 or 3 more major issues. That's the first issue is lack of maintenance, monitoring, and follow-up after installation. So why this is the main issue? Due to that, around 37% household biogas plant which has been already installed, operated, they are abandoned or failure now. There is a provision of maintenance in subsidy policy, and stakeholders involved are users itself. Then the company, which I just explained, that these are the company which are screened based on their criteria set by AAPC. AAPC, of course, it's a focal agency, and the local body recently, because the country was country is not in the country is being ruled by 3 tiers of government. But before 2015, we had only 1 tier of government. Basically, we had 2 tiers of government, that is at the national level and local level. But now we have just amended our constitution, we have amended our political policy. So we have 3 tiers of government. And the problem is local body is more authorized, or whatever the energy policy we are talking about, this is the jurisdiction of local body mainly. But local body, as just few minutes before when Michael was saying that local bodies are not very equipped, they have limited resources, they have limitation of resources. And even up to now, we are in transition phase. We have not allocated resources properly at the 3 tiers of government. So it was supposed to be done by local body, and local body is not nowhere in the picture. And few more specific issue regarding maintenance. I explained just 1 year guarantee on pipe fitting. So I don't want to go in detail about this technical thing. But in brief, it's a selected company's responsibility to monitor and follow back, and it has to be coordinated by AEPC, and it is in the jurisdiction of local authority. So so you can visualize which type of gap I'm talking about. And so so the main points are: role of local body not clear, is still in transition, as I explained, mainly targeted in rural part of the country, and lack of awareness about the maintenance bureaucracy. So maintenance bureaucracy seems little bit, even difficult even to understand us. Then you can visualize the SBD household biogas plant. They are promoted in rural area. Their socioeconomic status is not up to that level. So you can understand how they can approach to maintenance, approach for maintenance company. So this is one of the major finding from our perspective. And then second one, limited or no supply of spare parts in the local market and company office. Subsidy and promotion based on size, not on the performance. It's very important, because subsidy policy says you will get a certain amount of around 40% of subsidy if you are install household biogas plant of particular size. But the policy itself is silent which type of performance they are expecting. So they are basically providing subsidy only for maintenance, only for installation. But after installation, how SBAP user will proceed, it is not clearly mentioned in subsidy policy. So no subsidy finance.
Navin, we need to finish up soon.
Okay, thank you. So and this sorry, okay. Then we have similar for like a feeder stock issue and X, and the main issue is the X ante feasibility study, which should be mentioned in subsidy policy, so that we can visualize, or we can make sure whether whatever we are going to promote, that will be sustained. So just a couple of minutes, I'll finish it. And then subsidy. Okay, so subsidy policy gap, like RE like biogas is mainly in local bodies authority. Clear, I already explained, no clear SOP. Greater clarity of role is essential to enhance coordination. So my point is, why not handing over SBP or making accountable to local body, as community school and hospitals are being run by local body. So it is easy to monitor and follow up by local body rather than a central body. Okay, so the strength wise, we have a huge potential. I already explained suitable candidate to address SDG7, environmental friendly nature, option of biofertilizer, and may address other SDG too. And here I have mentioned weakness and then opportunities and threat. And in conclusion, HPV has a sufficient potential to address SDG7. Synchronization of policies governing HPV sector is needed. RE subsidy policies should address the specific issue discussed here. Lack of synergy among the policy tool, need good harmony and communication among stakeholders, and it should be addressed to proper policy. Local bodies should be made resourceful, and should be clear-cut maintenance and follow-up revision after warranty period. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Sorry. Thank you, Edward.
Great, thank you. Excellent presentation. Again, anybody on the call have questions for Navin or comments? Okay, I have lots of questions, but
Please go.
First of all, has the planning committee or commission heard from you about all these opportunities, threats, and weaknesses, and are they trying to address them yet?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. You've laid out all the issues and problems and possible solutions. Is the National Planning Commission, have they heard from you, and are they trying to address these issues?
Thank you. Let's hope they will see and they will react on that.
Okay.
Which is not. Thank you.
Not yet, I guess. How about in other countries? They're facing the same issue with biogas. Are they more successful than Nepal in addressing these issues? Do you know, Navin, if other countries in Asia are addressing biogas?
Yeah, when I reviewed some literature, I came to know that the mainly LDC country and developing country, especially in Africa, and even in some part of Asia, like in Bangladesh and other countries, they are also facing the similar kind of challenge, not the same challenge, but similar kind of challenge. Actually, they promote household biogas plant at local level without feasibility study, without detailed feasibility study. And what happens? They just immediately after 1-2 year installation, they face to supply the feedstock, which is the main essential thing. For example, I'll just give a simple example and try to conclude my thing. Because what is the criteria? Normally, you must have 1 or 2 cattle to get subsidy and to operate the household biogas plant. So by the time when you install this thing, at that time they might have that number of cattle, but after 1 or 2 years, due to some socioeconomic status, due to migration, internal migration, everything, they may not get the supply of such feedstock, and due to that, and it is being abandoned, and that thing is lagging in the policy. And that's why I focused on the detailed feasibility studies should be conducted. There must be a provision of that thing in the policy governing that program.
Right. Okay. Michael, you're still with us? I don't see your face, but I'm hoping you are.
Yes, I sure am it.
Great. The question I have for you is, given particularly, we've talked about all the different actors, say government agencies as well as private sector, and so is there somebody at the highest level, and I don't know who that would be, somebody at the UN? Are they trying to pull things together? And I know they're probably monitoring what's going on in each country, but are they trying to bring all the different actors together? We mentioned, and you mentioned earlier too, about the different sectors and how do you get them together?
Yeah, it's a complex one, Ed. I mean, I guess the 2030 agenda is global in nature. And the challenge is, how do you connect the global to the regional to the national? And that's what the UN system is trying to do. We have this, family of 5 regional commissions that connects all of the they connect all of the countries in each of the 5 global regions and do regional cooperation work. So it's important to kind of have this flow of information and ideas and coordination from the national level up to the global level. That's one dimension of it. The other dimension is at the national level, the SDGs are a really unique challenge for countries, because when the 2030 agenda was brought in, the idea is that there are these 17 SDGs. You don't pick and choose which ones you like and you want to do. You have to do all of them. And they all apply to developing countries and developed countries. So it's not like the old MDGs that was just looking at the developing world. So that brings a big coordination challenge. And if you look at countries as they're trying to manage the SDGs, in some countries they've had an SDG coordinating committee that sits under the Prime Minister's office, because the big challenge is to look across the different ministerial portfolios and track the progress of all SDGs at each country. So one thing that ESCAP is doing is we have an SDG progress report where we do a very detailed analysis for each country and for the region that shows where the SDGs are tracking. But it's a work in progress. I think there's a huge amount of work to coordinate and follow up on all of these SDG7 achievements.
And going back to one of your earlier points about resources, how are there additional resources being provided at certain levels to basically promote and monitor and evaluate the SDG7s? I mean, you can't, countries were not set up for this, but now they're trying to address them. They're using their own resources, but are there external resources they can tap into?
I don't believe there are specific ones for evaluation, but I guess one of the features of ESCAP's work program is to bring countries together to share best practices and experiences in these sorts of issues. And of course, what happens with SDGs is that it's extraordinarily complex because it's really the first time that you bring together this idea of people, prosperity, planet into one framework, and that involves engaging a lot of different actors. And the really important feature, I think, of the follow-up of SDGs is the multi-stakeholder dialogue, where you don't just have policy people talking to each other, you also involve the civil society organizations who are talking about the socioeconomic dimension, you bring in academia, you bring in others. But I think all of this is really a work in progress. I think it's something that some countries are doing well, some countries not doing so well, perhaps. But there's no specific resources that I'm aware of dedicated to the evaluation and monitoring of SDGs. But of course, individual countries have their own internal resource allocation to support this kind of thing.
Right. And do you have any insight on what happens after 2030?
This is a really good question, because if we turn the clock back to 2013, 2014, there was a huge amount of work which was called the post-2015 agenda, because the MDGs finished in 2015, and that was really to craft the SDGs. I don't really have any kind of insight into what's going to happen, but I think the basic framework and concept of the SDGs, I think, is a very durable one. And I think that philosophy behind it will continue, but of course, maybe with some new targets. So we're yet to see how the international community will organize themselves through the UN to develop like a new development agenda. But I think one thing that is a common feature across countries is climate change, talking about net zero by 2050. That is kind of a milepost that is not too distant. And achieving this net zero will drive a lot of things that we need to do in the development context. How we develop our energy systems, how we develop low carbon societies. This will be, kind of a big push, I think, a big influencing factor on the shape of the post-2030 development agenda.
Right. Well, I want to thank you and Navin for your participation, your presentations as well. Very informative. And I'm going to hand it over to Nazir, and he can tell you again.
Ed, we have a couple of questions on the chat. I'm not sure if we have enough time to take them, but what do you suggest?
Go ahead.
So we have a question from Romeo Santos. Romeo, would you like to unmute yourself and maybe quickly ask the question? We are towards the end of the session, but I guess we can at least take one question from the chat.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for the presentations from Michael and Nevin. I think I raised that question to Navin a while ago about what set of criteria did you use in your evaluation of a particular project or whatever that you presented a while ago?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, this is a purely academic, you can research, you can say, because so we conducted field visit. We selected a stratified random sampling, which covered almost all strata, socioeconomic, regional, everything. And based on that, we had a set of questionnaire. Actually, we had a structured questionnaire. Based on that, we collected information and then we analyzed. So this is a little bit research type of thing rather than it's a professional thing. So thank you very much. Just one line I want to mention, whatever the view, whatever the perception I expressed, It's my view based on research. It has nothing to do with any government agency or anything. This is my just academic research.
Okay,
Thank you.
I fully understand. I just retired from the academia also. This January. I understand that. Now my question to Michael, please, is about the slide that you shown a while ago. It mentions there that something like this, monitoring is so not impossible in a particular area that you talk about. Does that mean that evaluation also is not possible or impossible?
I think you're right, Romeo. I think they're of equal difficulty. We have a situation where we put up policy recommendations, then governments either act on those policy recommendations or don't act on them, or maybe they act on them partially. Then the challenge is, okay, what would they have done if we never did this work in the first place? That's the tricky part. And I know that, in government, for example, when your government people are trying to evaluate the impact of their programs on industry, what would industry have done if we never had that program? It's an impossible question to answer. And so often what you see is a mix of qualitative and quantitative evidence to try and back that up. But the policy formulation process is very difficult to predict. I mean, right now we're in a situation if I just take Southeast Asia, for example, in the last 5 years, just to pick a time frame, there's been a real groundswell of commitment to sustainable energy. Now, is that because of the support that's been offered? Is it because of policy advice from the IEA or SCAP? It's hard to predict. These are sort of human factors. Maybe it's simply the economics of clean energy are getting so much better that really drives the policy agenda. So it is really difficult to unpick these threads and understand, when you come to evaluating what is the exact impact of your programs.
Okay, thank you for that response. I'd like to thank you all, especially those proponents of this event, Ed. I think this is a very nice and excellent knowledge and learning exercise, and I will continue to follow the activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Romeo.
Thank you, Romeo, for the question, and Michael and Naveen for your responses. Thank you, everyone. I would just like to remind you that we have the next webinar in the series of the SDGs planned for January 31st. I have already put the registration link in the chat, so you can register for the session. We have two interesting, exciting session with two speakers from UNESCAPE and as well as JPAL South Asia. I would also like to invite you to share your feedback using the link in the chat. It's a very brief feedback form. You can also you can rate the current webinar, but you can also express your expectations for webinars in the future from EEAP. I would also like to invite you to follow us in Twitter and as well as LinkedIn. And you can also visit our website where we have very interesting resources on energy evaluation, and as well as you can check out our newsletter and learn more about the work that EEAP is doing. And you can also be part of the community as well. Thank you very much, everyone. We hope to see you again in 2 weeks with our next webinar, and as well as our newsletter is coming by end of February. Thank you, everyone, for joining this webinar again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.